Now, if you are looking for a surprise weapon against the move d4, then you came to the right place, as in today's lecture, not only I am going to show you some cool tricks and traps in the Cambridge Spring, but overall I am going to cover a mini replica of it, so you can literally use this line as a complete surprise weapon in the tournament practice. After white's d4, it doesn't matter whether you are knight to f6 or d5 player. The beauty is this line can be reached from both the opening choices. Here black choose the move d5, and after c4, indeed black goes with the queen's gambit decline structure starting with e6. So now both the players follow the main line for a while. Knight to c3, knight to f6, bishop to g5, and now rather than playing the traditional bishop to e7, black plays this very tricky move, knight to d7, which in fact create a small trap that if white thinks that he can win the pawn here as the knight is pinned, then congratulations, as he fall into the queen's gambit declined elephant trap, and I'm sure all of you are aware of it, that black can take this knight, sacrificing the whole queen, but the net result is after bishop to b4 check, queen to d2, bishop takes, king takes, and finally when black king take the bishop, if you carefully count the pieces, black is a clear piece up. So this is a famous elephant trap which you should aware of it, and if white fall for it, then the game can be finished very quickly. Okay, the main line continues with e3, liberating the last bishop, and we are going to respond with c6, and after knight to f3, the Cambridge Spring occurs on the board with the following move, queen to a5, whereupon we reach to the most critical junction of this line. So as I have highlighted over here, white has plenty of options, and amongst them knight to d2 is the in fact main line. However, there are also some sidelines starting with c captures d5 as well as bishop to f6. But first thing first, you will be very surprised that most natural move at this position, such as bishop to e2, bishop to d3 and queen to c2, immediately leads to tricky territory where black in fact get the upper hand at the opening stage. Let's see how. Well, the first move I want to consider is bishop to d3. Well, after that, we have this nice sequence, d captures c4, bishop captures c4, and now you pressurize this knight as well as the bishop by playing knight to e4. Well, obvious enough, white has to save the bishop, and it doesn't matter wherever it moves. The next sequence is pretty obvious. Knight takes c3. If queen to d2, then bishop to b4 is a very strong reply. So by force, white has to take back this knight. But after queen captures c3, knight to d2 is forced in order to preserve the bishop. But now black simplify the whole position with bishop to b4, rook to c1 after some exchanges. Finally, when you count the material at this point, black emerged with a clear pawn advantage. Well, the same story goes for the move bishop to e2, as after this we have once again this lethal pin, and when white defend this with queen to c2, what else, this lovely knight to e4 giving great headache to the white camp. They cannot move the rook, as we can simply chop it off. And apart from it, The best move suggested by engine here is white should castle on the king side, but after that, yup, you guessed it, we have multiple exchanges, whereupon our knight is attacking the bishop, and when white defended, we can continue with pawn takes c4, bishop takes c4, and knight to b6, where the end result again shows that black emerged with a clear pawn advantage. So you can see if white moves the light square bishop, then he straight away loses the vital pawn at the opening stage. The third move, queen to c2, I faced most oftenly in this line, and I can't tell you how many people fall for this, as once again we can create the winning tactic based on this pin, and the move black should start with is knight to e4. So double attack, and there is a small cute trap here if white continue with bishop to d3, which seems like a logical response, but unfortunately this straight away loses the piece. Can you find the sequence? Pause the video if you need more time. I'm showing you right now. It's the double attack motif, and it goes as follows. Knight captures g5, knight captures g5, and I hope you indeed see d captures c4, which highlight how crafty this opening is for the white. Well, apart from bishop to d3, white can once again move the bishop somewhere, let's say bishop to f4, but as usual after bishop to b4, white loses the vital pawn, as after rook to c1 and the move queen captures a2, again and again in this line, black wins the pawn at the opening stage, and white has absolutely no compensation. For example, one of my recent game against 1900 finished very quickly, where my opponent continued with bishop to d3. I simply exchange on c3, and after pawn takes, queen takes, rook takes, black simplified the position more with d captures c4, and after the multiple exchanges, at the end result, if you count the material, black is a vital pawn up with a clearly superior position. Okay, let's start with the sideline moves. And the fourth alternative I want to consider here is bishop takes f6. So white says, hang on, all the tactics is based on that poor bishop, so let me exchange it, and now I am going to continue with my normal development such as bishop to d3, and my position is completely safe, right? Well, yup, to some extent that's true, but still black is not out of the venom, as after our bishop to b4. Okay, white cannot play rook to c1, but he can indeed defend the knight with queen to c2. But exactly here, we can show the power of our position, starting with pawn takes c4, bishop takes c4, and now this lovely move c5, which I think already give black some huge problems. Well, it doesn't matter whether white castle or play d captures c5, both leads to the problematic position. For example, if we take the pawn, then after the following sequence, bishop to d7, castle on the king side, and as soon as the knight become unpinned, we chop it off, so that after pawn takes, queen takes, it doesn't matter wherever the light square bishop goes. Our next plan is pretty obvious. We castle on the king side, and as I have highlighted here, black has a very simple but effective plan of campaign. He can target the weak c3 pawn, and in a long run, it is only black who enjoys the attack and the fun here. Well, the same story goes if he goes with the castle, which is in fact, as per the database, most popular choice. Can you find the same sequence? Let's see. First, we start with c captures d4. Well, obviously, if you take back with the e pawn, then he get an isolated pawn. So the majority of the games continue with knight captures d4, but still, this leads to our familiar territory. Yup, you take on c3, pawn takes c3, and after castle, once again we have a very simple plan based on this weak c3 pawn. So as you can see, this bishop to f6 line doesn't give anything to the white camp except the weak c3 pawn. The fifth alternative I want to consider is c captures d5. And here, if you look at the database, black has plenty of choices, but I'm going to recommend you capture back with the e pawn so that our light square bishop get liberated. And I think this line not only instantly equalized for the black, but along the line he has some nasty ideas. For example, if you look at the most popular choice by white, bishop to d3, we can start with this very aggressive knight to e4. And after this, once again, what else but white is having some issues. There's a small trap here if your opponent takes this knight, which looks very obvious, but after pawn takes e4, white two pieces are hanging. And I just like to show you a grandmaster game from this position which demonstrate how quickly black get the advantage. White plays knight to e5, black chop it off, and after bishop to b4, even with the base sequence, that is castle, castle, knight takes e4, white could not hold his position as black demonstrate the problem in this position, namely queen captures e5, not only attacking the two pieces, but don't forget the b2 pawn hangs. And this is exactly happened in the game. After f3, black first played bishop to f5, and after bishop to f4, he indeed grabbed the pawn, where the end result is black emerged with a clearly winning position. So this is a nice trap you should remember when your opponent plays the move bishop to d3. Well, apart from capturing this knight, white can castle or play the move queen to c2. Both leads to a very comfortable position for black. For example, let's say castle is probably the most aggressive response here. And white's idea is that after knight takes g5, and the move knight to f6, if anything slow, then black can take out the bishops and castle on the king side. So the best response for the white here is to play e4, open up the position. But I don't think so this is working out well, as black can take this pawn and destroy white's bluff. For example, a sample line can go like this: knight takes e4, knight takes e4, knight takes e4, and now bishop to e7, so that when white plays rook to e1, we can safely castle. And if you look at the end result, not only black has a bishop pair, but white has an IQP, which as per the results clearly favors the black. Last but not least, let's look at the main line, starting with knight to d2. And after this, even though black has plenty of choices, I'm going to recommend this straightforward move, bishop to b4. So we are already hitting the c3, so white need to defend it. And after this, black can complete his development with castle and meeting the mainline move bishop to e2 with this nasty jab in the center. Yup, e5. And to be honest, this is what attracted me to play this aggressive line. Here white has plenty of options, but neither of them gives any advantage. For example, they can continue with bishop takes f6, thinking that black cannot capture back with the knight. Well, guess what? This is exactly we are going to deliver, as after d captures e5, we have this nice move, knight to e4, which once again creates some problems for the white. Would you believe recently I beat a title player in this line, where both the side played some obvious moves and at the end, white find himself at the trouble zone. Knight takes e4, pawn takes e4. He cannot take the pawn as c3 knight hangs with a check, so he castle. But as soon as the knight become unpinned, we have a simple maths. Yup, you take this knight, and even though after queen exchange, after rook to e8, this endgame already looks so wonderful for the black. Why? Well, the answer is very obvious. White has some fractured pawn on the queen side, and black is about to regain his material back. Well, my opponent tried to hang on to it for a while. He played rook to d1. I played king to f8. And now he attacked on e4. But as the king is safe, this is now easy for black. I took on e5, and after this check, my rook simply drops back. After rook to d1, bishop to e6, rook to d4, and the move f5, finally black consolidates his position, and because of white's horrible pawn structure on the queen side, at the end I finally managed to win. So I think this game is a moral demonstration what kind of disaster white is having if he goes for this line. The second move I want to consider is d captures e5. And the idea is that if black take this pawn, then white can destroy the black king side. But nope, here black has an equally good reply, namely knight to e4, our old friend, pressurizing the c3. So white response is force. He has to take it off. But once again we have this nice sequence. Pawn takes e4, castle on the king side, bishop takes c3. If queen takes pawn here, then after queen exchange and knight takes e5, once again with the bonus fractured queen side pawn. So that's not a good idea for the white. That means he has to take back with the pawn. And after this, we have a very simple sequence. Knight takes e5, queen takes e4. Here, rather than capturing this c3 pawn, black should play this tricky move, knight to g6, whereupon it doesn't matter wherever the bishop moves. Our goal is to complete our piece development with some tactical ideas. For example, there's a game in the database where white continue with queen to d4, defending the pawn. But now comes knight takes f4, pawn takes f4, but the end result is, yup, you know it, I don't need to repeat it. And I think we should see this game that how quickly black get the upper hand, as in the game black demonstrate how bad white position is, starting with rook a to d8. Surprisingly, after queen to e5, black goes for the queen trade, which at first sight looks like repairing the white pawn, but clearly he has seen the position in depth, as after rook to d2, rook to e1, and now rook to c2, confirms black advantage, as in the game white plays the move rook a to c1, but this leads to the losing of a pawn, and after rook to a1, black simply exchange the rook and play rook to a8, where in a long run the a pawn is a clear winner. Last but not least, the most popular choice here is castle on the king side, which I am really surprised as it allows what black wants to do, namely e captures d4. If you take back with the pawn, then you get an isolated pawn. So nope, that's not the point. White wants to play knight to b3 so that when the queen moves, he can take back with the knight. But in this line, tactics favors the black, as we can still inflict the double pawn in the white camp by playing bishop captures c3. Obviously, queen captures c3 goes into the blunder house, as knight to e4 wins the piece. So nope, that's not an idea, and white has to forcefully take back with the pawn. That means after pawn takes e4, bishop takes e4, we achieve what we want to do, not only isolating the white queenside pawn structure, but we have some tactics on the table, starting with queen to c5. Okay, there is a double attack, so white response is force. White has to take on f6. But after queen captures c4, I think black is in a completely driver's seat. And to illustrate my point, there is a quick win from the black from this position, where white continue with bishop to e7 attacking the rook, and after rook to e8, he doesn't like the idea of knight coming forward, so he played bishop to d6. But after knight to f6, black liberate the last piece, and in fact in the game white plays rook to b1, thinking that he is stopping the bishop movement, but this leads to the instant losing position. Can you find the killer blow here? Congratulations if you see the move knight to e4. And after this, no matter whatever white plays, he get a completely losing position. He cannot play bishop to b4 because of the simple tactic c5. So that is right out of the equation. And the only other alternative is moving the bishop on the king side. Well, after that, yup, you guessed the result. Black wins the vital pawn and then slowly converted the full point. That's it guys. I hope you enjoy and learn this high profile tricky line of the Cambridge Springs. You can do the more research in this line and maybe find more tricks and traps. But I'm sure I have given enough info to play this line confidently in your own game. Well, thank you for watching this video. Feel free to like, subscribe and comment, and I will see you in my next episode very soon. Bye and take care.